All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on a massive acquisition that honestly reveals the secret machinery powering our entire economy. This is the story of how a $2.25 billion deal made a logistics giant suddenly very, very visible. It all kicks off with this number, $2.25 billion. That is the jaw-dropping price Uber Freight shelled out in 2021 to buy a company called Transplace. And that, of course, raises the big question. Why on earth would a household name like Uber pay that much for a company most of us have never even heard of? Well, the answer starts with understanding what Transplace really was before this deal ever happened. You see, before it was an acquisition target, Transplace was, for all intents and purposes, an invisible giant in the world of logistics. Transplace operates in a space called third-party logistics, or 3PL for short. And here's the crucial thing you need to get. 3PLs are like the master conductors of the supply chain. They handle all the complicated stuff, planning, transportation, warehousing, but they do it without actually owning the assets. They don't own the trucks or the buildings. They just make sure everything runs in perfect harmony for their clients. And Transplace was an absolute master at this. For decades, it was literally the invisible backbone of North American commerce. The quiet, powerful engine making sure products got from point A to point B for some of the biggest companies you can imagine. And when I say quiet, I don't mean small. I mean, just look at the sheer scale of their operation. We're talking over 1,000 customers, and a whole lot of them were Fortune 500 giants in manufacturing, retail, and consumer goods. This wasn't some little niche player. It was a deeply essential part of how everything works. So if Transplace was already so successful, what changed? Well, in 2017, the private equity firm TPG Capital steps into the picture. And they didn't just buy the company, they came in with a whole playbook designed to turn this quiet giant into an absolute powerhouse. Once TPG took over in 2017, they moved incredibly fast. It was just boom, 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 a rapid-fire series of strategic buys to add key capabilities. They layered in intermodal transport, they got into parcel tech, they brought in high-value consulting. This wasn't random shopping, it was a very deliberate plan to build something much, much bigger. Each one of these acquisitions was like adding a new superpower to their toolkit. The Usin deal? Suddenly they have a strong grip on complex rail and truck shipping. Scan data? Bam! Now they can master the e-commerce parcel explosion we're all living through. And LeanCore brought in some seriously elite consulting smarts. They weren't just buying companies, they were buying strategic advantages. And just as this new powerhouse was fully assembled, it faced the ultimate global stress test, the pandemic. In early 2020, the unthinkable happened. Global trade pretty much just stopped. It ground to a halt. Factories went dark. The entire system seemed to freeze over. And the result was pure chaos. Borders became massive choke points. We all remember it, right? Walking into stores and seeing completely empty shelves. The supply chain wasn't just strained, it was breaking. But here's the kicker. This is where the new, supercharged Transplace really shined. It kept freight moving. Thanks to those strategic acquisitions, its platform was now agile enough to reroute shipments, find emergency truck space, and basically rebuild delivery networks on the fly. It didn't just survive the crisis, it proved its immense value. And you can bet people noticed. That incredible performance is exactly what got Uber's attention. It made them realize that Transplace was the missing piece they desperately needed. To really get it, you have to see them as two sides of the same coin. Uber Freight was the master of the spot market, built for speed, dynamic pricing, and those quick one-off shipments. But Transplace, they were the masters of contract freight. That's all about planning, stability, and the deep, long-term relationships that huge companies rely on. So bringing those two sides together, well, that had massive implications. This acquisition allowed Uber to transform itself from being just a marketplace into a true logistics backbone. And here is the strategic genius behind the deal. While Uber Freight was playing in that huge freight brokerage market, Transplace was a leader in a smaller, but far more stable and valuable slice of the pie, managed transportation. So by buying Transplace, Uber wasn't just getting bigger,
It was buying a strategic foothold in the most profitable part of the entire industry.
This quote really just sums it all up perfectly. In a market defined by disruption, Uber moved from marketplace to backbone. This wasn't just about adding a service. It was a fundamental shift in the company's entire identity. So in the end, that $2.25 billion price tag wasn't just some big number. It was the cost of a strategic masterstroke, a move that was years in the making. And it leaves us with a really fascinating question. As high-tech platforms and traditional logistics continue to collide, who is going to build the next invisible backbone of commerce?